is about to begin. Please take a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, the event is about to begin. Please take a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, the event is about to begin. Please take a seat.
Before I tell you about who he is and what he's supporting, I'll tell you something about the first meeting Dan and I had in Toronto, and I remember exactly the place. It's an espresso place, espresso bar, where people sell you coffee at a very high price to make you believe, it's very important to drink coffees in this place. And we were talking, and I had no idea exactly, or maybe I forgot what Susan told me. Actually, she told me who Dan Andreae is, but somehow I was not very much aware to whom I was meeting. And Dan being, such an unassuming person, let me tell you that. So, I'm very interested about education and neuroscience. Tell me about it. No, I had no idea about the background of Dan. So, I do my usual spiel and start talking about education, which I believe I understand, and neuroscience, which I make people believing I understand. And, we talk, and it was an amazing conversation, and I realized someone is sitting in front of me that probably understands something better than I do. And it's a true story then. And then, I think it was a very, very nice afternoon we spent. And then I left this espresso bar. I opened, what I was supposed to read, and maybe I forgot. And then I realized that Dr. Daniel Andreae has a doctorate in education and neuroscience. Oh boy. So I hope I didn't fail in a bad way. But I tell you, I was really, it's my fault. It's just that I forgot it. And maybe it was a good idea that I forgot it, because I think I would have just shut down and let you speak. But this was quite an amazing meeting. And I think that exchange of ideas really inspired me on many things, and I hope it did. So yes, this is Dr. Dan Andreae, who is a doctorate in education and neuroscience. He serves as a patron of the Alzheimer's Association of Toronto and the honorary chair of the Council on Brain Injury, among other many things I've heard you're doing. He received many honors for his leadership in philanthropy. Was also inducted into the Weizmann Institute's President Circles in 2016 at the Institute Global Gathering in London. And you realize that Dan is very, very passionate about neuroscience. And one way or another, got to meet Ivo Speigel, who is a young scientist here. We still call you a young scientist. And a little later, part of you will go to his lab. And Ivo research, which is in neuroscience, and he'll describe what he's doing, is involved in something which I think is for me one of the most incredible issues about, well, at least one of the most incredible issues about brain research, and it's the famous topic of nature versus nurture. The simple question, we as human beings are born on day 0 with a brain already, it's there. And then we start living. All parents are talking to us, we listen to music, we see the world through our eyes, we hear it, we touch it, and that immediately changes our brain structure. Huge amount of brain material is being created, connections are being created at an amazing rate, by the way, at a young age, all over the time we're learning. As human beings today, how much are we, as we were created at time 0, and how much are we, as we have educated ourselves, let's say, or others have been educated, and how much are we influenced by how we were born and by everything else happening in our life? You realize that if we could answer that question, we could solve a huge amount of problems. That goes from behavior. Why do we behave like we are? Some people say people are nasty because they were born nasty, or just very nice because they were born very nice. From that question to diseases that we have and our influences by connections we have in the brain, and I'm not talking only about neurodiseases. So it's an amazing topic, which, there are answers, and of course there are methods of studying it, and you can dream of using twins, for example, to try to understand what's the difference, twins that have been separated and living together and so forth. But this is a very complex topic, but if we could get even some more and more details about it, and we do have some of it, then clearly we would make huge advances in our understanding of how the brain is being formed, and what's this intelligence all about, and why are we who we are, and what's the inhibition factors and excitation factor that we have even in sensory experiences. How do we relate to the world, and what makes us What makes some of these, unfortunately, people having autism and schizophrenia and others not? I mean, how much of all of this, or even better, emotion, right? I mean, describe this internal emotional state that we all have, and where is it? From the day we're born, or only due to the experience we have? So these are very deep questions, and I know that Dan is always very interested in these issues, and I think the reason you are, and here we didn't talk about this, but I realized when I made myself ready about this, and this time I made myself ready, by the way, I remember something. It's because you're interested in education and brain research. And there is a connection here. You all realize there is a connection. I don't need to explain it. And that connection, I think, is also part of the interest that you have in the research of Ivo Speigel, scientist here at the Weizmann Institute. So in order to explain it in a better way, because no, I stopped, that's my limit of knowledge, I'd like to first invite Dr. Ivo Speigel to say a few words about his work in his language that he's doing today at the Department of Neurobiology in his lab. Thank you very much.
Dear Dan, Andreae, dear Professor Weizmann, dear friends, guests, colleagues, let me start by welcoming you and just thanking you all for coming, particularly the guests from Canada and abroad. You all experience how far away it is, and as far away as it is to come here, as much as we appreciate you coming here, I think everybody told you probably over the last 2-3 days how much that means to us. It really does. This is way beyond financial terms. This is really important and strikes at the essence of what we're doing, this connectedness to a large community. So thank you all for coming. And of course, most importantly, I would like to thank, or maybe most importantly, I would like to thank Dan Andreae for coming here and having the opportunity to finally show him what the whole lab is about. As Professor Weizmann mentioned, Dan is a neuroscientist by himself, and that is on the one side very nice, because I can actually tell someone who understands what I'm talking about and get input from here, and on the other side it puts a certain burden on me, because the amount of BS that I can tell is relatively limited. So I have to be kind of careful. So what is the Dr. Dan Andreae Lab for Brain Research all about? I guess the core question really is that we're interested in is how do our genes or our genetic setup, together with the environment that we all live in, define the function of our brain? How do these two factors shape the development of our brain, and how does this affect brain function once we're adults? And of course, the point being that these are very interrelated subjects. You cannot really separate the development from the adult, or the development from the adult from the development, and you cannot really separate the environment from the genes. So there is a constant back and forth that starts the moment we're born, some would say probably before we are born, and stretches until the moment we pass away. And so just to drive that point home beyond the example, the famous twins, is of course, I guess all of us have some kind of a notion that smart parents have smart kids, or smarter kids tend to be coming from smarter parents. Now, whether that is a factor or not remains to be answered. But the point really is, if that is the case, is that because of the genetics of the parents, or because the parents had the wits to take care of a very good upbringing of their kids? And so that is one of these genes versus nature versus nurture questions that we're asking. Similarly, in the reverse, in the disease situations, we now know that several neurodevelopmental disorders are genetically associated with certain mutations, but the fact is that only some individuals actually develop the disorder and some not. And it seems to be the case that environmental factors have a very important influence on the disease development and progression. And this is yet another example of these very complicated interrelations. Now, the tricky part of this is, and Professor Weizmann didn't explicitly name it, the tricky part of this is that there is a very far distance between genes and ultimately a behavior, whether it's normal or not. And it basically encompasses all the organizational levels that we find in the brain. So this starts from the genes, the genome itself, the DNA, through the molecules that we call messenger RNAs, to the proteins that do something in the cell, to the cells, which in this case are neurons, to then the circuits, which are a conglomerate of neurons that work together, that then ultimately determine brain function in terms of how we perceive the world and how we act upon. And so that is really the challenge, this tremendous stretch of organizational levels. Now, I guess I would argue, and I didn't take the time, but someone stopped me when I get to overtime. I would argue that in principle, we have the key to all of these levels, or we have many of the key components on many of these levels in our hand. But the tricky part really is to bring it all together. And that, I would say, is the most formidable challenge, on top of finding out many, many things in each one of these levels. And just to give you an idea, each one of these levels easily fills a laboratory's lifetime worth of work. So it's the amount and it's the depth of knowledge that we need. And so my decision to come here to the Weizmann Institute really was influenced by this multi-level analysis that we need to tackle these problems. You really have to start from the genetics and take it all the way to the behavior. And I would argue that there is very few places in the world that offer such a interactive and collaborative environment as the Weizmann Institute has, and particularly this department, that can give you an answer, or at least an intellectual environment to answer these questions. And so I would say we're privileged to be right at the center where, in my view, all these strings come together. And so how can we start breaking this intricate problem apart? And here I want to just give you a taste of kind of how we think about this. I mean, the basic question is being asked by many laboratories, and everybody starts, I guess, at the level where that is closest to her or his heart. And so the basic questions that we started out with is, so if we just, let's step away from the suicide notion that, you know, the brain is complex and we will never solve it. So let's focus on one region of the brain that we understand relatively well, which is the visual cortex. This has been studied forever. We kind of know what it does, responses to visual stimuli and so forth. And so what we started out with asking, okay, the brain is, you know, that brain of the part is very complex. Let's look at all of the cells that we have there and see how they actually respond to a stimulus. And so, without going into further detail, that simple experiment, which, you know, just to give you an idea, it took 5 years to do, but it was a simple experiment in essence. When you then look at the data and you extrapolate it, gave actually a striking answer. A, each cell, if this is different. Second, each cell is tuned to what it has to do in its genetic response, is tuned to what it has to do in a circuit. And when you then start looking at the function of these genes, what they're doing, surprisingly, they're actually not the ones changing the brain, that particular area, but they're actually taking care that that brain region doesn't change. So that is kind of the opposite of what we expected. So we know from beautiful work over several decades that experience do change our brain. Now, there is an idea, if everything changes, how can it still do the same thing, right? So there has to be also what we call a homeostatic mechanism that keeps everything more or less roughly in place and allows for small changes in within. And so I'd say the major hypothesis that my lab is now operating under, or what we would like to test, is really, is this the case? So if these genes are really homeostatic factors, as we think they are, then that would suggest that the regions of the genome that control these genes, they are themselves part of this homeostatic regulation mechanisms. And with that, I would like to close. This is now a big part of what we're doing in the lab. We want to analyze which parts of the genome execute the regulation of these genes, then ask, do they indeed regulate specific cellular functions? So for example, do they regulate the connection between neurons that we call synapses? And if so, are these modulations really in charge for keeping the activity of the brain, not change it, but actually keep it the way it was originally? And so with that, I would like to thank Dan again for his support and really his friendship, and thank you all for your time. And I really hope that many of you will have the opportunity and, you know, come visit the palace. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ivo. And then it's now your turn. I'll ask you to say a few words. You can choose to give a lecture in neuroscience, in education, just whatever you want. Please, can I invite you? And, okay. That's the minimum we can do for you.
Okay.
And let me read it. It's a scroll of appreciation to Dr. Daniel C. Andreae, in grateful recognition of the establishment of the Dr. Daniel C. Andreae Laboratory for Brain Research, for his generosity to and friendship with the Weizmann Institute of Science, and his commitment to advancing science for the benefit of all humanity.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now you can all see why I'm sponsoring Evo, right? With all this, and actually, you know, Daniel, I do have a checklist here, you see, for today, and one was a gorgeous outdoor setting, the other was the weather. So thank you for ordering that for us. Came through, and it's just splendid to be looking out here and to be surrounded by Weizmann family. And I refer to my Canadian family down here, but then I look around and I see people from all over the world. And isn't that the essence of what Weizmann is all about? And I'm honored that you're here today to partake in this dedication. And you know, thinking of Daniel's comments last night when he said the quintessence of science is to identify questions and then discover what the answers will be, often in a very peripatetic way. We just don't know where they're going to be. But I have great faith, Ivo, that you will carry out beautifully that mandate. Now, certainly just a word about Weizmann here, because before I talk a little bit about neuroscience, but only for 30 seconds, okay, I promise you, Daniel, on this one. And it's wonderful, again, to be here and to meet new people, to reacquaint with old friends, to talk to some fascinating people, to be exposed to jaw-dropping research. It just tingles the spine, which we've been exposed to that way, and to share experiences, to make it a memorable several days, which I know it will be for all of you. And so certainly Weizmann means different things to different people, and we've heard all of these words over the past 3 days. We've heard amazing, special, unparalleled, inspirational. It's true, they all are that. And when I was thinking last night about what Weizmann might mean to me, I came up with things that might include this: inspiration leading to innovation, perseverance leading to progress, creativity leading to collaboration, vision leading to victories in science and humanities, and groundbreaking leading to game-changing. And that's what I think that Weizmann is really all about. Now, certainly when it comes to supporting, Evo, you know, I did want to give to the Weizmann, and I wanted to be in the field of neuroscience, which I'm very interested in too. And I went to my my advisor, okay, Susan Stern, who is the wonderful CEO, ED of Canada, Weizmann. And I said, where do I go? Who should I consider? Because there are so many possibilities there. And she said, I have just the person that you might want to. She'd never tell you what to do, but she said, just the person that I think you would really love. And it turned out to be Evo. And within a heartbeat, I shouldn't say that really, but very quickly I decided that yes, the issue of nature versus nurture was one that is so critical as we try to unravel the intricate mysteries of the brain, which, as you point out, Evo, can be done. It's just going to take time and money and effort and genius, which you have in spades that way. And so certainly when it comes to nature and nurture, it is a quintessential argument. And so we talk about nature, we're talking about our genetics, our biology, we're talking about our molecules, and as we learned a couple of nights ago on Saturday, our proteins. When we're talking about our nurture, we're talking about our external environment and what impinges upon us to help us create our perceptions, sensations, emotions, etc. that way. And so what I loved about Evo's work is that most scientists start from the brain out. What Evo is doing is starting from, well, both together, the synergy of both of those, which I think is absolutely true. You know, if you're listening to a symphony, the music last night, and somebody is playing the violin, and I say to you, how much of that music is the violinist and how much is the violin? you probably say, Dan, you're crazy. I mean, it's all together. You can't separate it out. And the same way I think about nature and nurture, they complement each other, they work together, and understanding those mysteries is really what we're here to do and what Evo is going to do that way. And so taking it out of the realm of philosophy, turning it into concrete, rubber hits the road science. And so I'm very excited to see how you're going to unravel this intricate dance, okay? And again, it is not just for disease, okay, which we know is very important in disease prevention and cure, but also for health as well, how we can live more healthily knowing this information. And so I am just delighted and privileged and honored to be up here today and to be working with you, Daniel Weizmann, in what is just the most remarkable institute in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. I think there's a lot to learn from what you said, including the way you refer to Susan, where you said she never tells you what to do. She also never tells me what to do. But we both do exactly what she wants. That's the way it works. All right, so now we will go for a visit. Now, the visit is organized in a slightly different ways. And, okay, for the Canadian, no, it's not going to be, there's no separation here. But the Canadian go with Dan. Wait a minute, it's orange. You go with Dan and Evo visit and unveil to the unveiling ceremony. That's for the Canadian. And then each one of you has a different color bracelet. Now look there. See all the colors on the side? Okay. So the blue one go with the blue sign. That's the lab of Professor Noam Sobel. The green go with the green. That's the lab of Professor Nahum Ulanovsky. The red go with the red. That's Professor Andreae. And guess what? The yellow goes with the yellow, that's Dr. Ofer Izal. That's the way we're going to separate. And then when all of this is finished, a little later on, we will, regroup at the Lopati building for lunch. So
we have to do it again. We will. We must. I'd love to. It's a happy moment.
Very happy moment. Yeah, we're going